What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Appreciate you guys tuning in for another video. If you guys are new to the channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos. You know, we're still doing 3 videos a week right now, so we don't want you to miss out on any of those future videos. If you guys are looking for some more behind the scenes, deep dive type content, we have a members only channel, so you could consider becoming a MBF bass head and becoming a member of the channel. But definitely appreciate you guys tuning in for this video. Today we're talking about something, this is a question I get asked all the time. You know, whether it's at a show, whether it's a DM on social media, people always ask about spike it or chartreuse dye, any sort of chartreuse dye, and when I like to use it, when I like to dye the tails of whatever bait I may be throwing. So I'm going to walk you guys through kind of my strategy behind using the spike it, and give you some scenarios, show you some baits, and even paint up a few and show you how pretty they can make the bait look. So if you guys are ready, let's jump in and let's talk all about this super underutilized way to get you some more bites. Okay, so we are talking all about your dyes or dips or markers. There's all different options of spike it available. I know another popular brand would be like JJ's Magic, I think. There's a few other options, but it's all basically the same stuff. You're trying to dye the very tip of your bait, or maybe not. You're trying to dye your soft plastic bait with a different color. Whether it be chartreuse, be orange, they have black, they have blue, they have red, they have all different colors. But for me, I only use 2 colors. So obviously you can see the chartreuse, that is what I use the most. Other than chartreuse, I like to use orange. I only have the orange in the markers. I don't have it in the spray or the dip. I just have the orange in the marker. Now, we'll start with this guy because this is the one I use the least, to be totally honest. So this is a aerosol spray. It's basically like, you know, hairspray or whatever type of spray that you use. You take this out and you spray it. You ready? No. That's the reason I don't use this one that much, is because it's a little bit of a mess. You know, you kind of got to hold your bait out over the boat, over the water, and spray. And you can't be very accurate with it. You know, obviously it's a spray. It's an aerosol spray shooting out. So it's not as accurate as dipping the tails in a little bit of dip, or you could be even more accurate with the marker and be very precise on where you want to put that dye. So for me, I really don't use the aerosol a whole lot, but I have it here just in case a situation arises where I may need to you know, kind of spray something and just add a little bit to a different type of bait that I couldn't really dip or draw on. So now let's talk about the main 2 I use here. So obviously the markers, this is the more precise. So this is extremely detailed. You can get in and draw any little, you know, if you want to draw bars down the side of a bait, if you want to draw, just touch the claws, you can do all that with the marker. Now, let's start with orange, because orange is the one I use the least, honestly. So when I'm using orange, there's 2 things I'm really trying to imitate. One, be a crawfish pincher. So you'll take your jig like this guy right here, and I like to use the orange marker and just go right along the edge of the claws. Now you see I got these in Ziploc bags, and they double as a place to lay your bait down so you don't get the dip or the marker on your carpet. So that's what I like to do with the orange, is this dye the very edge of the claws on, say, a jig trailer or a craw style bait. And it adds just a little bit of life to this bait. You know, it looks, a lot of times the crawfish will have just a little bit of orange at the very end of their claws, and adding that little bit with the marker really brightens up the bait. You know, this was just a straight green pumpkin jig. Now I got just a little bit of orange at the end, and it just adds a little extra flair, little extra thing for you to see when the bait's in the water, so you know those bass are gonna see that orange, and it just helps your bait look a little more realistic. So other than that, you know, I love using the orange for just the claws on my crawfish style baits. The only other time I'm really gonna use orange, that would be when I'm trying to imitate perch. And you see this is a chatterbait here. It's got a Zaco trailer on it. And whenever the bass are really feeding in on those yellow perch, I like to add a little bit of orange, not to the tail, but to the belly of my Zaco trailer. So I'll take this marker and basically color the belly of this right here. Even get in the hook slot there. But now he's got a little bit of orange on him, and those perch have orange on them. So when this is coming through the grass or wherever it may be, when you have those perch around, they're gonna see that orange on the belly, and they really help you get a few more bites when they're feeding in on yellow perch. Now, situations you would do this, you know, they're fairly unique. Obviously, it's a yellow perch, so it's gonna be up north. Generally speaking, it's gonna be on a natural lake, so the water's gonna be clean. So you're gonna be throwing your green pumpkin style colors, but I really like adding that orange to the belly. And it just really gives them a target. If those fish are coming up at the bait, they can see that orange a little bit better than green pumpkin, and it gives them a place to attack, a place to target, and just helps it stand out just a little bit more. So those are really the two situations that I use orange spike it or marker. What do they call this? This is a, yeah, dip and glow marker. That's the dip and glow marker. So the orange I use on the tips of crawfish claws and the belly of any type of trailer when I'm trying to imitate a perch. So that right there, that's the two situations I'm using orange. Now, let's move on to chartreuse. Chartreuse gets a little more use out of me than the orange because it imitates a couple different things. Obviously, you could use the chartreuse as well to imitate a perch. You know, the perch kind of have some chartreuse-ish looking colors to them. So you could do the same thing with the belly on a trailer. Or, you know, chartreuse really imitates the tail of a bluegill really well. So whenever I'm using the chartreuse dye, typically I'm just dyeing the last little bit of a tail. So we're gonna pretend that this belly doesn't have orange on it, and I would be throwing just a straight green pumpkin chatterbait. This is when I'm gonna dip the tail of this Zaco down in the dye. I'm not trying to be super precise with it. You know, I'm not just going for the little bit on the end. See, it gets a little bit more on the tail. It kind of dyes, you know, a ½ inch or an inch of the tail. So you're not trying to be super precise. That's when I like to use the actual dip, not the marker. But now that little bit of a chartreuse on a tail really imitates a bluegill really well. I mean, I know you guys can't see it. It blends in, but when you dip it in the water, it really, really pops. But adding that little chartreuse to the tail imitates a bluegill extremely well. You know, a lot of times if you look at a bluegill in the water, there's a little section at the end of their tail that kind of glows chartreuse. And, you know, the bass can see that. So I always want my bait to look as natural as possible. And dipping that tail of that Zaco does just that. Now, I don't like to dip the whole thing. You know, I don't want to dip all the way down to the joints here of the tail. You know, I generally like to be about halfway down the actual forked tail part. You just want a little bit on the back end of that just to imitate those bluegill extremely well. But now you can see, I mean, I got orange and chartreuse on there, and it really prettied up that bait from just a straight green pumpkin to now it is a much more natural looking bluegill or perch colored bait. I mean, it really fancied up that bait, and I believe that'll help you get a few more bites just in the color alone. So the other option you have for using chartreuse is going to be throwing a Cinco. And this is one that people don't really think about or use too much. So whenever I'm throwing a wacky worm Cinco, like this is just a 5-inch green pumpkin blue colored Senko. So it's already pretty bluegill colored. It's green pumpkin blue. It looks very natural like a bluegill in the water. And this could be when you're throwing it around the bass spawning or bluegill spawn. When the bass are feeding in on bluegill, I always like my bait to look as natural as possible. So there's two options you can do here. One would be if you're just kind of flipping him around on, say, a Texas rig, I'm only going to dye one end. But if I'm throwing him on a wacky worm, I'm actually going to dye both ends a little bit. So this is another situation where I want to use the marker and not the dip because it's a little more precise. I just want a little tiny bit. Let's get these out of the way. Just a little tiny bit on each end. So I'm just going to take this chartreuse and just basically the width of the marker on the very end of this Senko, and do the same thing on this end of the Senko as well. Now, like I said, this shows up extremely well in the water, but now you got a little bit of a chartreuse tip on each side. You can see the back side here very well. But you got a little bit of a chartreuse tip on each side of a Senko, and it's going to look like two bluegill maybe coming together. And it's an easy target for those fish. It just gives them a little extra oomph to come eat that. You know, it makes it look just a little bit more natural than just your standard Senko. So that's, you know, probably when I use it the most is when I'm fishing around bass that are feeding on bluegill, dipping just the very end of my Senko or my chatterbait trailer, something like that. And that's when I get the most use out of the chartreuse, would be dipping my Senkos or using the marker on my Senkos. So last up, we got one more situation where I find myself reaching for the chartreuse dye, and that's going to be on your swim bait fishing, more particularly on my A-rig fishing. So if I'm fishing an A-rig, and especially a little bit dirtier water, say the water has gotten a little bit dirty, obviously, you know, you got 5 baits on an A-rig, or, you know, however many baits you have on your A-rig. For me, I'm using 5 baits, 2 dummies, 3 with hooks. So basically, I will take that middle bait, that bait that's probably getting targeted the most, and I actually dip the whole tail of the swim bait. So this is, again, when I reach for the dip, not the marker, because you're going for a whole tail. And we're going to dip the whole tail of that swim bait. And now that one is going to stand out a little bit different than the rest of your swim baits in the school on the A-rig. So you can see now he's got a chartreuse tail. He's going to stand out. He's going to look a little bit different, and it gives those fish a target if they're following that A-rig. And in turn, 9 times out of 10, you're going to catch them on this one, the one that has just a little bit different look to them, that has that chartreuse tail. You're going to catch the fish on that one that you dyed right there. So it is a option to just help you get a few more bites and have those fish key in on one bait. And if they can target one bait and eat one bait, you have a better chance of hooking that fish and landing it, rather than them just running through your whole A-rig. Just kind of, you know, if they all look the same, they're just going to kind of run through it and grab whatever they can. And then you kind of run the chance of them eating one of your dummy baits, or, you know, just getting foul hooked and not landing them. So always like to add a little bit of chartreuse dye to one of the baits so it gives them something to target. So that's it, guys. That's the situations where I'm using the chartreuse and the orange dye, I guess. But like I said, it is it's not all the time, you know, but generally as the water warms up, the crawfish get a little color in them, the bluegill start spawning, the bass start spawning. I really like starting to add a little dip or marker, spike it, JJ Magic, whatever you want to call it. Add a little flavor to the baits, and I do believe it helps you get a few more bites in certain situations. So hopefully you guys learned something from this video. Do me a favor, drop a comment down below. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you learned anything. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And we'll see you guys next time.